In this video lecture, I'm going to reintroduce again the linkage between catabolism and anabolism and the pursuit and utilization of energy by living things. Now, some of this I've already covered, but it doesn't hurt to kind of rehash it again before we delve into this topic a little bit more deeply. And one thing I want to caution you about hang on, I'm having an issue. Okay, one thing I want to caution you guys about is that your textbook, as you're reading in the textbook, it's going to go into more detail on many of the things that we're going to discuss in this chapter. And to me, some of that information goes beyond the scope of this class, and especially in light of the fact that many students have not had a college-level chemistry class when they take this one. And so we're going to be kind of looking at these things in this chapter from a bigger picture standpoint. It is important material because it carries over into your other biology and health sciences courses, and it's fundamental to how living things operate. But we're going to be kind of taking a look at things that a little bit more from a bigger picture standpoint than some of the nitty-gritty detail standpoints that you have in your textbook. Not that your textbook goes into all of the finer details. If you take later biology and or chemistry classes during your college career, you will see that the nitty-gritty gets much more nitty-gritty as you move through this topic and other courses. All right, but just as a review, now we've already discussed how, as part of metabolism, catabolism and anabolic reactions or anabolism are linked. Catabolic reactions break down larger molecules into smaller ones. That releases energy. That energy gets temporarily stored over here in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And then ATP molecules get broken apart at this bond right here. That releases energy that's used to power the anabolic reactions that cells have to perform to stay alive. And that includes building all of their important molecules that are needed for the structure of the cell or the organism, and also for its function. So very important processes. And as we'll see, carbohydrates are generally the primary or preferred energy sources for many or most living things. And so this story that we're going to be going through, we're really going to be focusing in on for a while on the catabolic side. How do we go from energy stored in these food molecules to having that energy captured and harnessed and stored in the form of ATP? What does it take to accomplish that? So that'll be kind of the main focus for most of Chapter 7. And carbohydrates, that story usually starts with glucose. As we go through this story, though, just keep in mind that, as you know, living things use other types of organic nutrients as well to meet their energy and building block needs. Another term you're going to see used quite a bit is oxidation, or when you're reading in the textbook, it will talk about glucose being oxidized or lipids being oxidized. And kind of for our purposes in this course, you can almost think about that as the molecules are being broken down. But what oxidation literally refers to, I just made any chemists cringe, I know. But if you take a chemistry course, you'll learn a lot more about oxidation, believe me. But what that literally means is a molecule or an atom, an ion, has lost electrons. And when that happens, especially in living things, the loss of electrons on a molecule is associated with the gain of oxygen atoms. So that's where the term oxidation comes from. Very often when a molecule of some type loses electrons, an oxygen atom will bind. But that doesn't always take place. So the definition really is the loss of electrons. And if you think about it, okay, so we've talked about how if a bigger substance is broken apart into smaller ones, that releases energy. So when oxidation reactions take place, electrons are lost off of a molecule. That's a type of catabolism. This bigger molecule has lost some of its parts, its electrons, and has become smaller, and that has released some chemical energy that was stored in the original molecule. So you'll see that term used quite a bit as you're reading through Chapter 7. And again, just keep in mind the story is generally told starting with glucose, but other sugars, fats, amino acids can be oxidized to harness energy, to release energy that can be harnessed. And we capture some of that energy in the form of ATP. And then also I want you guys to keep in mind enzymes. We just talked about how important enzymes are, and all of these chemical reactions would not take place if enzymes were not available. So different enzymes are used for all these different chemical reactions and chemical reaction steps. Enzymes are generally very specific about the types of chemical reactions they catalyze, very specific about their substrates, very specific about the products that they make. So keep that in mind as well, because if your enzymes aren't happy, all of this stuff is not going to happen, and then you're not going to be able to survive and function. Then endergonic and exergonic. Again, we've talked about this already, but just to review again, catabolic reactions are generally exergonic. This means energy is exiting, energy is released. Anabolic reactions are generally endergonic, which means they require an energy input to make them happen. That just makes sense. If you're building a larger molecule from a smaller one, it's going to take an energy input to force that to happen. Just like if you're building a building, it takes energy to build a building. All right, so that was just kind of a quick little lead-in to the story of catabolism, what goes on in, and we're really going to be focusing here on the chemoheterotroph organisms, the ones that break down chemical nutrients in order to harness their energy. And your chemoheterotrophs also get their carbon-containing building blocks from these organic compounds that they're absorbing from their surroundings as well. So catabolism will make up, this topic will make up the bulk of what we'll cover here in Chapter 7. As we go through this, keep in mind this information in large part is going to apply to what you're learning about the human body and other courses as well, because almost all living things follow these same patterns for how they, or at least all chemoheterotrophic organisms like we are and most of the microorganisms we're studying in this class use these same pathways to harness energy.